you may, some you may know, some you may not. And please stop me and ask further questions if needed. I have a big list over here of just things to things to inform. The first thing I'm going to touch upon was that we had our Office of Child Care on-site federal monitoring the beginning of April. So once every 3 years, our liaisons come, our team comes to Vermont and does an audit of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So in previous years, the focus may have been on the quality activities and how we are going through those, or a specific piece of eligibility. But this year, the three focus areas were on 12-month eligibility. So making sure that when we are eligible, that they are getting the full 12-month eligibility as determined. And if there is an interruption, how does that pick back up? So our CCCSA partners were there with us for that. The second one was health and safety. So the licensors had to pull at random 16 cases and walk the team through how they were specifically monitoring to health and safety requirements, and taking them through sort of the licensure visits, kind of following that track along the process of how licensing does monitor that. And then the final area, which should not be a shock, was improper payments and fraud, waste, and abuse. So we had our improper payment team help the monitoring team walk through their process, how frequently they do random pulls, how they work with the CDDIS folks to identify maybe strange patterns in billing, and they did a great job. So at our exit conference, we had invited, of course, Janet and Deputy Secretary Krista McClure came. And when I tell you the OCC team was effusive, Deputy Secretary McClure said, "I've never heard such a nice exit conference." They were very, very pleased with Vermont. They felt like we really had it together. The licensors in particular were just citing licensing numbers, like off the top of their head. They were walking them through that. The improper payments provisions, where we are very, very tight on that. It reflects in our error rate, actually, which is happening, another thing that's happening right now. We won't get the report from them for about 90 days. So we're at the first 30 days. So I wouldn't expect to see that for a couple of months, but it was really positive. We won't see them again for 3 years. So we like this team. This is a new team for us after we lost our Boston-based team. So this was the first time we've been with this group of people, and I thought it went really, really well. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about, also OCC, is that the final notice of the rules rescission came out maybe Tuesday. And for those of you who were following sort of the process of this, the notice of the rules rescission came initially in July. They said, we're going to do it. And then formally it popped up for a comment period in January. And now it has become formal. And the rules that they have rolled back are from the 2024 CCDF final rule. So those four are paying on enrollment, prospective payments, the 7% of income for families, and grants for infants, toddlers, children with disabilities, and children in underserved areas. So just to frame that, those were all four things we had waivers for. So none of those things were things we were currently doing. So it won't change our flow like what we're doing now. And I also want to, like, when I say grants for infants and toddlers, they were talking about sort of contracted slots, not the grants that we do through First Children's Finance or SAG grants. It was a very tightly defined grants and contracts through a CCDF payment. So I'll pause there if you have any OCC questions for me. Everybody's like, no, Dawn, we don't want to have any OCC questions for you.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to note that like getting that kind of exemplary sort of exit interview coming right after 2 years of like intense change in all the systems of right of childcare and how the state does things, I think is just phenomenal. So I just right like we kind of forget it's been a few months since we had any big Act 76 changes and so I just wanted to note that it's amazing. You all have worked so hard.
Thanks. Yeah, it was a good feeling. I mean, federal audits are, they're federal audits. Nobody loves to have auditors come in and you worry and you stress. And, so to have it be such a positive experience was delightful to say, this is just a chance to be better. And of course, we have opportunities to be better, but it's just nice to have the affirmation that, yeah, we've got some tight systems where, Act 76 allowed us to hire a second improper payments monitoring person. So again, that's another way that we built up our system to address potential areas of concern before they became big potential areas of concern. So it's interesting. They now post all the monitoring visits for all the states on the OCC website. And if you ever want to do something just fascinating, and I'm obviously now a CCDF nerd as the co-administrator, you just go in and read other states' findings. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. Some states don't get licensing visits to everyone every year. I mean, it's where you just think, oh my God, wow. So we're doing great, relatively. We could do better. Okay, so the other thing I want to mention that Renee isn't here, I think we have time, yeah. The Head Start was just there, a notice of proposed rulemaking was just released regarding Head Start. And we believe that there will be more than one, perhaps two. So we don't know the timing of perhaps the second one, but the first one is all about eliminating the requirements in the standards now of achieving pay parity with public schools. And there's a whole number of proposed rescissions in that notice of proposed rulemaking. I'm sure, Holly, I see you probably have a copy of it at hand. But it's a little worrisome. And so be on the lookout. That's coming out for the comment period. It just opened for the comment period. So of course, if you feel like reading it and offering comments, that would be great. Other things. Well, let's see. So Helen and I today had another meeting with the AOE Apprenticeship Licensure Program for UPK licensure, for teacher licensure. And I think we're humming along. That's a PDG project. I think we're building with Vermont AOIC a really nice pilot, a pilot that will be achievable. It's only 5 people, but still, we'd rather dedicate to 5 people and kind of map it out with a new process. I will now be the person sponsoring the provisional licenses as I have a teaching license. So we're really trying to shift some of that into CDD. I think Andrew just maybe messaged me and said that we just got the approval that CDD requests the ECE provisionals. So the standards board just approved that, hot off the presses. So we'll be able to carry, we'll be able to carry that. And I will say, without giving anything away, that we really are trying very hard to make this an accessible process with things like interviews with individuals so they can show how they are meeting the competencies. Doing the competency overall checks one at a time versus having to pull the whole portfolio together and hand it in. So I think we're really being thoughtful, and we really have great partners at AOE with Andrew Prouton and Amelia Wurzburg to help design this program. It's been a real bright spot, actually. I've been excited to see it come together. Okay, moving on. For those of you who aren't in the know, CIS Institute is next Tuesday at Killington. I'm not sure who all in this group is attending. Sorry, excuse me, now I'm a little coffee. But we're excited. There's at least 250 people coming for a day of collegiality and learning from our peers and speakers. They have a great speaker on tap, and I think it's going to be great. They are offering CEUs if you are a person in a profession that requires CEUs through the Office of Professional Regulation. So that is another thing. We got that process done. That was Ann Dillenbeck. She was very persistent in figuring out how to get that done. So that's exciting. It'll be a great day. Let's see. We're looking at extending. So I just sent my first grant draft about the infant toddler credential. I promise. It went to the grants and contracts office. So as Paula was talking about like coursework, I'm like, yeah, I got coursework I'm building too. So hopefully that will be through CCV, and we will build the sequential infant toddler credential, which will align closely with the ECE1 and work in the associates program. We're really being thoughtful about how we can stack these courses rather than, people, Janet and I talk all about, workshops are great, but you need a depth of knowledge. And I think that that this gives folks the opportunity to build that. We are also looking at extending the program for infant toddler caregivers coursework. They have a couple of other options, and they have a coaching curriculum option that we are very interested in. We're gathering some more information. So we've had 250. Yeah, it's been about 230 people go through the PITC. Yeah. Yeah, 250. And every time the interest grows and we get more and more applicants. So rather than decreasing, it's increasing. And so we will just keep on doing it because I don't know if folks have friends, colleagues, staff who've taken the course, but it is a very high quality, nationally recognized, actually internationally recognized program of excellence. And then finally, I have the funds for the disaster relief. So a couple months ago, we were notified that we had been awarded $19.3 million for a disaster relief grant that we thought we were writing like a letter of interest, like a application of interest to, but apparently that was the grant. We'd asked for 30 million. And we received 19.3, which was actually really good when we look at the amount of, I think they had 250 million to put out. So this was for states who'd had a declared disaster in 2003 and 2004. The application included, mapping out the disaster zones, and then it asked us to identify activities that we perhaps would undertake with this grant. And the 3 activities that we identified were construction. A sort of a repayment option where folks who had covered insurance or covered repair or something related to flood that we have a little pot of money that we can reimburse people for that. And then finally, we have money to do the sort of minor renovations in the same way that First Children's Finance is doing that work. So we have some money for major construction, and then we have the sort of minor construction and things that is going to be modeled the same way as the First Children's Finance grants are now working. Now, you almost never get money for major construction. Almost never. In fact, Agency of Transportation was a little thrown off when they found out that we had money for a real construction. Vertical build is what they called it, the vertical build. So we are working with some consultants to figure out how to stand that program up. Ray will be leading that program once she returns, but we are going to have we have to have some design work with Guidehouse, who are the consultants, because this isn't what CDD does. We are not construction experts. We do not know about environmental planning or all of the things that it takes to get a building built. But we have this money. It needs to be completely liquidated by 2030. So we do have a few years of build up. So keep your eyes open. This was really exciting that we got this money. We were one of how many states and tribes? Yeah, there were very few. So Vermont getting this was a real coup. And it came kind of right in back of PDG. So we felt like we were swimming a little in all the money we needed to get out, which is wonderful. It's a wonderful problem to have, but it's also a stressful problem to have. So yeah, that we actually have construction money. So if anybody wants a consult in design, that's another one of my talents, actually, the design. I asked Helen if she thought Janet would let me go like consult with the architects, and she said, no, I don't think Janet will let you do that. But I want to. Okay, let's see. Oh, I'm a little over. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of what I just said. There were a lot of things in there. My goodness.
I'm going to express on behalf of everybody who's dropping it into the chat how excited we are about the provisionally licensed people. And offer my support and help. And I'm going to email you separately, but this is huge and well needed. And thank you, CDD, for taking the reins on being the superintendent, for lack of a different word, on the application.
I am the superintendent of the world.
It's just another title to add into your alphabet soup at the end of your name. But
yes,
I will personally express thank you, and I hope that you saw everything in the chat and people's hearts in that one. That's huge. And all excitement, in all those updates you just gave us.
Yeah, I think Becca, I came in only at the tail end of the previous sort of version of this, and I've been really heartened by Andrew's flexibility and really thinking about how best to meet our folks, specifically early childhood folks, where they are, and to make sure that not only they have sports, but that their assessors are early childhood people. Like, really thinking about, and that they'll be meeting the NACCE competency, like it just really thinking through those pieces that are going to, that are going to be successful. And we chose to do a very small pilot because, which will be a bit different. So we wanted to make sure we got it right with, I'm a big fan of a small pilot before you you launch it out into everything, just to kind of work out the kinks. So yeah, Heather and Brenda are both at Vermont AYC are helping with sort of the design, the other design as they will be implementing it. Okay, let's see. Anna, I can't remember how we readjusted the agenda. I was actually in a meeting with Andrew and Amelia right before this meeting started.
Not a worry. Yeah, it's lots of excitement for that good news. So we're glad you were in that meeting. So we are going to kind of Mandy developed a really strong kind of facilitation guide for a follow-up of our small group conversations from last time. So really want her to continue to kind of lead on her vision for that. So we're gonna wait and have that conversation in June. So we're gonna hand it over to Erin to give us an overview of the findings from this year's childcare business survey. So we will wait and, like I said, have that conversation with Mandy in June. So would love to see folks there. And just a little housekeeping reminder that we are canceling the July meeting while it's in my brain. Erin, the floor is yours, and you have extra time should you want it.
Oh, well, thank you. I feel like when I come and talk about data, I always imagine it's 10 minutes and then I get at least 10 minutes of questions. So I'm not always great at predicting what the amount of time required will be. Also, my dog is a little confused because this is about the time I normally take him out for a walk. So he's kind of walking in circles right now. It's a little distracting. And Dawn, wow, that is a tough act to follow. So, and also thinking, well, survey data is maybe not like the most fun and exciting thing. And you've been talking about $19 million in construction funds and apprenticeships for teaching licenses. And this is not going to be anything that that exciting. But my team and I were down in Bennington yesterday. And Helen tagged along for some of that, which was like just a super bonus for us. She had to leave before the last stop, which was at the Bennington High School project, where they're doing this historic preservation of this old high school in Bennington that had, and I learned much of this yesterday from the developer, that the original building was built in 1913, and then it was added on in 1939, and then added on 2 more times after that. And so they're preserving each part of the building to like what it was built at, if that makes sense. And he walked us through the whole project, which was a little unexpected. We thought we were just going to see the plans and the childcare, and it was. I mention all of this because it was amazing, and thinking about like the idea of all this construction. It was amazing how much he had to, the like developer and the director of the childcare that will be going in there, have to be thinking about like years in advance of when this childcare will actually open. And I mean, we walked through the like completely under construction space where they knew exactly where the sinks were going, and yet it was just like concrete from 1913 or whatever that they were having to scrub for lead paint, and yet they knew where the bathrooms would be, and they knew where the plumbing was going, and like how children were going to get to where the playground was going to be built, and it's just astounding, like how much thought you have to do ahead of time and how many things they were keeping in mind. Anyway, it was mind-blowing and inspiring to see this building that will be childcare and a senior center and a community center and affordable housing and market rate housing. And anyways, okay, enough about Bennington. It was really fun. I also wanted to give you all a moment to like shift your brain, right, Linda? Oh my gosh. And we couldn't help but talk about how we want to bring the whole team to see the Otter Creek Child Center, because it is such an inspiration of like you go from this to this, and sometimes seeing the finished product can be what you need to keep yourself going. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about every year we First Children's Finance does this survey with all the childcare businesses in the state. We ask them a lot of questions about their business, right? So we're asking them about their finances, we're asking about their enrollment, et cetera. And so I'm going to share a little bit of those results. I think I presented this last year to this committee, maybe the year before that. And I have always used this as an opportunity to stick some data about the system as a whole, because we kind of keep track of that. And I'm gonna take advantage of this opportunity to do that again. And this year, Janet McLaughlin and I had the opportunity to do a workshop last week, and she shared some data from the state. And I said, oh my gosh, this is remarkable. I feel like people need to hear these things, because day to day, and even these survey results, it doesn't feel like we're moving things that far, and it doesn't feel like we're moving fast enough. And I think some of these big picture results are inspiring. So I'm gonna start out with a little bit of that, and now I'm gonna figure out the way to share my screen. So hang on just one second while I do that. And also, usually I take questions as I go, but I'm gonna, in the interest of time, and because these presentations, like we get, oh, I can't share my screen. Can someone make it so I can share my screen? These presentations often run long because I respond to all the questions, and then I don't get all the way to the end. So if you can put your questions in the chat as you have them, or save them for the end, but I'll respond to them at the end if that's okay. And unless somebody has something burning, and then you can feel free to jump in and interrupt. So, all right. Hopefully you see my screen. Yeah, thumbs up. Great, thanks, Dawn. Okay, so here we are. There we go. All right, do it in the fancy slideshow presentation format. State of Vermont's childcare business sector. There we go. Just a reminder. Oh, sorry, hang on. Oh my gosh. That was horrible. All right, I gotta fix this. I made the mistake of recording this audio. Now I don't know how to get out of it. All right, here we go. All right, we're gonna try this again. Apologies. Maybe I won't do this in the slideshow view. There we go. I thought I took all of that out. All right, well, start. Oops, there we go. All right, just a reminder, First Children's Finance does 3 things in the states where we operate. We provide support for childcare businesses themselves. helping them strengthen their operations and helping them run their childcare in a sustainable way. We also help them expand and start up, all those kinds of things. We work with communities and if they're interested in addressing childcare needs in their community, can work with them. We also work at a systems level. Some of you may be familiar with some of the cost of care work that we've done with the state of Vermont, as well as like this state of Vermont's childcare survey and our supply and demand analysis, things like that. So just a reminder, in case anybody didn't know, that's what we do. So I will, as the kids say, this is the TLDR of if your eyes glaze over when you're looking at all these graphs and things. This is sort of the summary version, and I'll repeat this again at the very end in a less colorful format. First, the number of childcare programs continues to increase, not very fast. The curve is not super steep. That's sustainable. And also the capacity is actually increasing faster than the number of programs is increasing. We continue to see, and this has been going on for a long time, consolidation in the industry. So that's just one note. And I will show you in a bit, we are especially seeing that true of infants and toddlers, which I'm especially proud of, right? Because we do administer this infant and toddler capacity building grant. It's been hard work adding infant and toddler capacity, especially when the cost of providing infant and toddler care is more than providing care for school-age children or preschool children. So, so we're all working really hard to do that. We've seen, and you'll see in just a moment, that enrollment in these programs is stable, and that vacancies edged up just slightly from 2024, but continue to be really small as a percentage of licensed capacity. Hiring remains difficult, no surprise to anyone here. We did see, and you'll see in a second, that wages increased year over year from 2024 to 2025. And also that other expenses are continuing to increase kind of year over year over year. And that puts pressure on revenue sources and programs wanting to raise tuition. So I'll talk more about that. Most programs that we surveyed report that they're financially sustainable and that their business is stable, that they kind of a large minority expect to remain in business indefinitely. And that attitudes are generally level from previous years that we've done this study, and we're starting to see some improvement in attitudes towards compensation in the field, which is kind of exciting, and I think is directly related to seeing an increase in teacher and assistant teacher wages. Okay, so those are my 5 key points that I think you'll see as I go through the slides. Here we go. Okay, so the first couple of slides, first 3 slides, are going to talk about the industry overall. As I promised, these are what I thought was inspiring data that that Janet McLaughlin helped pull together. I'm not exactly sure what reports these came from, to be totally honest, but we shared these at a workshop in Washington, D.C., so I feel like I'm allowed to share them here. So looking at the net change, so this is either we have more programs than we had the year before, or we have less programs than we had the year before. And this is in the state fiscal year timeline. So each year is a state fiscal year, not a calendar year, still 12 months, just a slightly different time frame. You can see that, right, 2020, we lost a relatively lot of programs, not surprising, that was COVID. You can also see in the 3 years following, we had net programs much smaller than that COVID year, but still notable. And especially notable is 2023, right? This is the year that that Act 76 was passed. And we reported at that time that 1 in 5 programs said that they were likely to close if something didn't change. And so you can see that something did change in state fiscal year 2024. Act 76 was enacted, and since then, in those 2 state fiscal years, we've seen a net increase in programs for the first time in like 5 years that they were tracking. So just want to note that, and based on our first quarter of 2026, which is January through March, we're about even. I believe there was one more program that closed than that opened, but that's not necessarily a quarter we would expect to see a lot of programs opening. So that's that. And then the other thing, like I said, we continue to see consolidation in the industry. This shows that net capacity, right? So again, the net increase or decrease in spaces over the year before. And you can see that in state fiscal year 2023, again, this is the year preceding the enactment of Act 76. We really were in a bad place. We were losing a lot of spaces. And in the subsequent years since then, we've seen a net increase each year, with a pretty sizable increase in the previous or the most recent 2 years. About this idea that we are seeing kind of a gradual increase in the number of programs, which has kind of turned the curve on that. We're also seeing a little steeper increase in the number of capacity. But drilling down on this a little bit, so again, this came from the Child Development Division. The next slide is some capacity numbers that we keep track of. Same numbers, just presented in a different way, but I thought might be helpful. So this is looking at numbers over time, licensed capacity, but we break it out by age group, sort of age cohort. And what I really wanted to show you is not so much the preschool and school age slots, which are interesting, but on a percentage change basis, we don't see big changes percentage wise. But the infants and toddlers down there at the bottom, right, going from 3,500 to 3,900, going from 3,500 to 3,800, those are percentage increases that are notable. And I wanted to point that out, that we have been investing grant funds and helping people start up or expand infant and toddler spaces. We've also, last year, the only increase in reimbursement rates was for infant and toddler reimbursement. So I think that those sorts of investments are starting to pay off. And I know it's not enough. I know there aren't enough infant spaces. We think toddler spaces are catching up because that is such a short window of time. But anyway, just wanted to note all that. So that's sort of what's happening, like macro level in the childcare industry. And now I'm going to talk about the results of the survey. Here's the results of the survey. So just a reminder, I share this each year. We do this survey, we send it out to all regulated programs in the state. This is to kind of show you what our response rate looked like. So overall, 15% of programs responded to our survey. That's 163 out of 1,059 programs. You can see how that breaks down by the type of program. You can also see how it breaks down by the geography. You can see that every county is reflected here, and some counties have higher participation than others as a percentage of the number of programs in their county. And we continue to have after school sort of underrepresented in this sample, but I want to note that each year we have had more after school programs participating in the survey. And this year, for the first time, we segmented out the after school programs in some of the graphs where we're not looking over time. So you'll be able to see some of that. We hope to do more of that in the future. Okay, so we ask a question about their enrollment and whether it was stable, whether it was increasing. And you can see, this is overall all the programs that responded, the percentage that said their enrollment was stable. This is important because while increasing enrollment sounds great, it can actually be a real stress on a program to have rapidly increasing enrollment, especially when the program, like you can see here, 6% of infant spaces of licensed capacity are open. That's a really small percentage, especially because we're looking at that of licensed capacity. And this is self-reported by the programs. This is not us looking at what their actual license capacity is or what their actual enrollment. This is in that moment in time, late February, early March, told us their license capacity was and how many spaces they said they had filled. Oh, look at that. Okay. Hiring, no surprise here. Hiring is still difficult. I really was hoping to see that downward trend continue of the number of people or percentage of people reporting that it was very or somewhat difficult, right? The past 3 years, it was kind of slowly marching downward. This year we saw it tick back up. Not sure if that's just a blip or if that's really notable yet, but and we're not in a great place yet on hiring. I want to point out that the percentage of programs that offered benefits like health insurance and retirement is largely unchanged from the previous year. And this is people reporting on what they offered in 2025 compared to what they offered in 2024. And similarly, we continue to see about 2/3 of them offer discounts on childcare to their employees, assuming childcare is available. But what did change, and I'm really excited to present this, is we saw changes in teacher and assistant teacher, and these are the only two positions we ask about. So we're not holding anything back here. We asked about highest wages for teachers and lowest wages for teachers, and for assistant teachers. And what you're seeing are the averages in each of those, 2024 compared to 2025. So there was a 5% increase in the highest wages for teachers, an 8% increase in the lowest wages for teachers, also a 6% for assistant teachers, the highest level, and 5% at the lowest level. So I think this is, to me, this is telling that we're seeing some wage increases that are bigger than just the rate of inflation. Inflation rate has been, up until very recently, has been in the like 2 to 3%. So seeing increases in wages, basically double that, makes me feel like we're really seeing some positive progress on wages. All right, this is a big slide. It doesn't say as much as it looks like. It's just a little bit busy. The vast majority of childcares pay their rent or mortgage on time. That's really critical, right? Rent or mortgage is usually the second biggest expense of a childcare business after staffing. But it's important to note that while virtually every center and after school program is paying their rent or mortgage on time, 84% of family childcare say that they're paying their rent or mortgage on time. And so that leaves them a little bit more vulnerable. So I just think that's really important to note that difference. Again, most of all the childcares are paying all their other bills on time. And a sizable portion, kind of a quarter to a third, are having some kind of facility repair or maintenance issue that they've had to defer or delay, usually because it's a big investment, it's a big expense, and or because it's hard to find contractors to do work. So worth keeping an eye on that. But in general, they're paying their staff, they're increasing wages, they're continuing to offer benefits at about the same level they were before, and they're paying their rent or their mortgage on time. However, all of this is with the backdrop of a second year in a row of significant increases in some of the major expense categories outside of rent or mortgage has actually been relatively stable, right? We're not seeing very many people reporting significant increases there. But things like food, especially for family childcare, 2 years in a row of more than half of those family childcare is reporting a significant increase, not just an increase, but a significant increase in the cost of food. Sorry about that. I say this because a significant increase in an expense category is more than just a couple of percent increase, right? A significant increase is something large and surprising. And in a time where and I'll say this again a little later, at a time where there are caps on how much programs can raise their tuition, right, which is our primary source of revenue, seeing how significant increases year over year are sort of stacking up really has me a little bit concerned about their financial stability in the future, right? They're address these things in the current year because Act 76 increased their reimbursement rates and it so significantly. I worry that if these costs continue to rise a third year in a row, and their ability to raise their revenue continues to be capped, I am concerned about that. So just something to keep an eye on is like inflation and the expenses that go into childcare. So we also ask about their plans to raise tuition. And you can see that in general centers and after school programs, fewer and fewer expect to raise their tuition in the coming year. Family childcare has been kind of up and down, which makes me think that they maybe are on like an every 2-year cycle of raising tuition. And again, this is right. They have market forces, right? Their customers can't afford to pay more. They don't want to price themselves out of the market, but at the same time, they're seeing significant increases in some of their expenses. The other source, so CCFAP is widely accepted. You can see that's the one that goes kind of all the way over on the right side. About 70% of family childcares accept CCFAP, 95% of centers, and just about 90% of after-school programs report that they accept CCFAP as a form of payment for tuition. Some of the other funding streams like universal pre-K, notable 60-some% of centers, but less than 10% of the family childcares that responded to our survey participate in universal pre-K. So that's kind of an interesting finding. And then also noting that the food program, 40% of family childcares participate in the food program. Only about a third of centers participate in that. So, and of course, Room for Me is the after-school capacity building grant. So, of course, after-school programs are primarily who is participating in those. Other things that programs do to address their business goals and I separated this into sort of two categories. And I'll just walk through it left to right. These are small percentages. The top of my scale here is 50%. I want to note that. Usually I do this on a 100% scale, but these are so small that it was really hard to see. So very few people are doing any of these things. But I think it's important to note things like 12% of family childcare reported that they used high interest financing, but only about 3% of family childcare took out a business loan, right? And so they're using probably credit cards to finance their business and paying maybe 20% interest. They're not taking out business loans, which might be at like 8% interest. So I think that's just useful to note some of these business practices and how they're different for centers compared to family childcare particularly. I also thought it was notable about 19% of centers said they used their emergency fund. And about 21% of centers said they added money to their emergency fund, right? And so it's interesting to me that we're seeing people in a position where they're able to plan for the future, and we're also seeing programs in a position where they are needing to address emergencies. All percentages of both, but still notable. All right. To manage their businesses, we are seeing programs use technology for family childcare. I put this on a separate slide because their results are really different than centers and after-school programs. They are using childcare management software, not at the same rates of centers and after-school, but there's definitely a sizable minority. Let's see, 36% this year, and relatively consistent with previous years. There's some up and down because the sample sizes are not big. We're seeing more people using accounting software, which is exciting. And I like their family childcare business more seriously. Centers, somewhat similar story, just bigger numbers, right? Centers use accounting software. Centers use childcare management software. They rely on hiring platforms, payroll systems. Less of them use web software or like website software. That may be because they're getting what they need from things like their childcare management platforms. Just about through this. Like I said at the beginning, we ask about their financial stability. This is just the family childcare. So about 50% reported that their financial stability is about the same as it was last year, and 35% said that they're more stable. These are, I feel like this is something to be proud of, that family childcares are feeling relatively stable in their business. And almost a third of them now say that they could be in business indefinitely. That feels like a big deal. And a relatively small number of them, sorry about that, that they only plan to be in business 1 or 2 years. That compares to something that was the very first year we did the study, which was for 2023, it was something like 1 in 5. So that's kind of notable. Then for centers and after school programs, which again, I lumped together because that's how we have analyzed it in the past. Let's see. It's consistently nearly half of them report that they'll be in business indefinitely. And they're also something like more than half of them say they're just as stable as they were before. After school programs are reporting that they are more stable than they were before, which feels also important. But in general, programs are financially stable and feel like they are as stable as they were last year, which feels useful in terms of sustainability. All right, the last couple of things I'm going to talk about are we ask a whole bunch of questions about these statements and how much do you agree or disagree with them. We've been asking this for several years. So the 2026 data is the orange bar. I think that the ones in the middle, the workforce is paid fairly and compensation is improving, are kind of two of the more notable ones. This is just family childcares in this graph. I also want to note that I feel like I am surprised at that more people aren't rejoicing and excited and optimistic. And so I just want to name that. I'm optimistic and I feel like everybody should be optimistic. So it's hard for me to share that only 60% of family childcares are optimistic about the future of their business. All right, and then this is centers and after school. And weirdly, I have changed the color scheme. So the green bar is the 2026. And again, I think it's really notable. More of them say the workforce is paid fairly and that compensation is improving compared to last year and somewhat compared to the year before. It's also unsatisfying as a researcher, right? Like I want those lines to all be going in one direction or another, good news or bad news. And this year they've all kind of like they were up and then down and then up again. And I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure what to make of that. So stay tuned for next year, I guess, when the trend will hopefully take a more definitive line. So I'm going to remind you what my 5 key takeaways were. That we've seen some slow growth in the number of programs, but that the capacity continues to increase, especially for infants and toddlers, that enrollment has been stable and programs are financially stable. Hiring is still hard, even though we've seen wages increasing year over year. And their other expenses are continuing to rise, and that we're seeing some improvement in attitudes towards compensation and investments in subsidy. And with that, I shall stop. Stop sharing my screen. Almost certainly someone will ask me to put a slide back up, but happy to do that. Okay, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to read the chat. Feel free to jump in if you have any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. I was just thinking that the survey was done before we started to have these really sizable jumps in costs. And I'm curious in the next year's version how that's going to play out. I'm guessing you're going to see a real correlation with things like rising fuel costs and how folks are managing their businesses.
Yeah, it's a great observation. And I think, it'll be so interesting to see what happens the rest of this year, right? Because if it continues sort of where it's at or like doesn't go back down by the end of 2026, then I think we will see some real I think we'll see some real challenges with people affording to pay for things. On the other hand, if things get addressed, right? If I don't know, if the price of gas and other things, and stabilizes or decrease, drops back down, and so that means that other costs don't continue. Will happen if the price of fuel continues to stay high. Then it might all, it might be a blip, and it might all settle out. So I am really curious, and it is one of the things about doing a survey once a year is that we try to do it at the same time every year to minimize any sort of external influences in that way. But you just never know what's going to be happening in the world in that moment.
Indeed. Other questions?
I have a question. Are there any like grant opportunities I'm just not aware of that are folks can tap into to support the like maintenance or utilities, thinking of like those FCCs that are taking out potentially like credit card debt to pay for this sort of stuff, which we know is not a sustainable approach to running the business. Are there grant opportunities out there? Is it something that's possible in some capacity?
I mean, there are some grants potentially for like emergency situations, but these are small businesses. They're for-profit businesses. Grants isn't like the typical way that that small businesses in any industry get supported. Um, there are loan opportunities available specific for childcares. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why I made the comment about, you could use your credit card to finance things at like 20 or 25% interest, or, you could take out a small business loan or a loan from a CDFI like us or like the Community Loan Fund. That's probably at 8%, and you can manage
Sure.
that over 5 years or something. And I think that it's I think it's something we've been talking about needing to sort of socialize that,
Sure.
because loan payments feel really scary.
Hmm.
And right, like seeing, oh, I'm going to owe $300 a month or whatever it is. Whereas like your credit card bill, you get that and you see, oh, well, I could just make the minimum payment of
Sure.
$20. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you don't think about the fact that that $20 is over the next 20 years. And
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
That.
Sure. A follow-up to that, I guess, is if are there family childcare home providers specifically, I'm thinking of after looking at that data, that are running profitable businesses that we
yes,
can like look at and compare, right? I'd assume yes, that we could look at like what's happening in these spaces where they're not able to be profitable, and how do we, if we want, especially looking at like childcare desert parts of the state, this to be a model that's sustainable for folks. Uh, are there models potentially you're already doing this work, Erin, of like guiding them through like how do we make sure that this can be profitable for them so it's sustainable?
yeah. Um, so we are working with a number of family childcares and centers looking at sort of their financial situation, their profit and loss, their cash flow, like understanding what their business is. And um, we don't do this sort of at scale in the aggregate. We do it one-on-one with individual business clients. Anecdotally, I think that family childcares that are having trouble making ends meet, it is often because they are lacking enrollment one way or another. And because they
Right.
really prefer to have older children.
Sure.
And by older children, I mean maybe school age kids or maybe preschool kids.
Sure.
And the public schools are opening more and more programs for after school, for preschool, and I think demographics are shifting, and I think they've got to figure that out. It's not just that, but I think
Yeah.
enrollment is kind of the key
That's interesting.
thing, and also a willingness to charge families.
Yeah. Sure.
I mean, we still see somebody yesterday commented to me when we were down in Bennington that they continue to be sometimes horrified at how little programs are charging in tuition. Um,
Yeah.
and don't realize that they can charge more.
Yeah. And that true cost of care message. Sure.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate you.
I hope that answers your question. Dora, I see your question about how much money we're talking about across programs. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Just again, those high interest loans.
Oh,
I mean, are we talking about like, it just makes, I think it's along the same lines of what Alyssa's thinking about, like what are supports and, is there a rotating fund? Is this something, et
yeah,
cetera?
yep. Yes. And I also want to say, just because someone's using high interest financing doesn't mean they're not a profitable program. Like, they might choose to do that because that's how they do things. And we hear every once in a while, not by the majority, but people still say, oh yeah, I don't trust the banks. I'm not doing that. Or I'm not taking out a loan. I'm not going into debt. And somehow credit card debt isn't put in the same category. So I just want to reiterate that just because they're using their credit card to finance their business, and it might be, I'm going to pay that off on my credit card over several years. That right, but that doesn't mean their business isn't sustainable. So I want to be careful not to draw that conclusion. It doesn't mean that they're financially vulnerable. I just wish they would think about how to finance things in a more sustainable way.
Super helpful clarification. Uh, this is again, I don't know if you were framing the optimism piece that like you're very optimistic and you're reporting out that it's only 60% of family childcare homes. And I'm curious if you feel like that is um I mean, optimism is a feeling. Like there are days where I feel optimistic, there are days where I do not feel optimistic. Like, do you feel like there is a again, like the so what is where I'm curious if it's like here, like we need to be sort of sharing more of the optimistic, or is it just like oh, and there are challenging behaviors, and we're, have like there are all the reasons why things are challenging, and I don't know if there's a way to if you feel like there's an opportunity to shift and what that would be.
It's a fascinating question. I don't know the answer. I also want to say that looking back at the centers and after school programs, it was 70% who reported they were optimistic, which is still, to me anyway, it's like in both cases, it's the majority. And also, um, it feels like we have made such a big, sizable shift. And when you get to share this story of what we've done in Vermont with people in other states, it feels like we should be rejoicing all the time. And what Dora just said, the work is hard. This work is hard. And so I think that I don't want to be Pollyanna about it. I don't want to I think it is what it is, and I think it's not wrong. I think it's hard to be optimistic when it feels like there are so many things that are challenging, whether it's challenging behaviors among children, and we keep hearing that there's more and more of that, whether it's challenges staffing a classroom or staff who are having personal problems or feeling like yeah, like just that there is so much at risk right now, in so many ways that are sort of weighing us down. Maybe it's just hard to be optimistic, in general, not about childcare, but in general. So I don't want to like just put a positive message out just to put a positive message out. I think there's good things out there. I think we talk about them. I'm always happy to find more reasons to talk about them, but I also don't want to. Like I thought about not even reporting these attitudes, right? Because it just didn't feel like the narrative I wanted. But I thought it was important to put it out there because I think it is true that it's complicated. And even when your business is doing okay, even when things are like financially stable, there's still a lot of pressures. And there's still a lot that make you feel vulnerable. Um, so I think it's important to keep that in mind. That was a really dodgy answer to your question, but
Becca, it looks like you have your hand up.
I was just gonna throw spaghetti at the wall and just put this out there to people since Erin was bringing up like public schools opening more programs, more after school programs. Um, For those of you who aren't aware, I co-facilitate the state UPK coordinators meetings on a monthly basis. And so we're meeting next week, so this is a month old for information. But the general feeling for those people kind of in leadership positions across the state we're really, as school district people, waiting and in flux, and really there's a lot of anxiety around educational transformation and what that's going to do. I think, that feeling is kind of we're riding through it because it looks at this moment in time, right, that like we're not going to muck with UPK until at least next session due to all those reports. Thank you. That was a really great decision. But I wanted to mention that we are talking about those pieces. And, are people going full day and people are actually starting to pull back from thinking about full day. Because of no surprise to those of you who are in programs daily operating them, it's really hard a full 6+ hour day. And then you add in being a school district person. So I wanted to throw that out. The other piece of info is that at our meeting, which is next Thursday, Pat Fitzsimmons and a good proportion of the early ed team are coming to give us updates. And so I think that will be a really good level setting and knowledge piece for those public school pre-K leadership people to hear and get enrolled and embedded in this conversation connection. And Erin, I didn't mean to like supersede anything you said, but I was like, ooh.
All good.
Well, thank you, Erin. I enjoyed it. I have optimism. I couldn't do this job if I didn't believe things were going to be improving and just improving and improving and improving. So stay in early childhood for that long if you're not optimistic about what you do. So I think this time, Anna, is this when we ask folks for updates or sharings? The floor is yours. The weather has again stunned you all into silence.
I can share if that's okay.
Sure, of course.
We are looking for someone who would be a good match for leading trainings for the infant toddler VELS training. If you have any recommendations, you can send me a message and I'll put my email into chat. And then there was another one. Oh, medication administration. This should by no means make you think we don't have enough trainers for medication administration. We do. And we've got so many of them in the calendar and they're available and there are openings, all of that. I'm simply a person who likes to have an additional trainer or two in case somebody needs to adjust their schedule. So if you know any registered nurses that might be interested in that, you can send me that information as well. The same with the VELS trainings. We are doing great with those, right, Becca Webb? And so just wanted to let you know about that. Otherwise, I don't know what else to say. I'm like the rest of you. It is a foggy day and it does feel like Monday. I also just wanted to echo everybody else. Erin, I always appreciate your presentations. Is that slide deck available?
I'll send it to Anna or Anna and Dawn after this and
Yeah,
share.
I bet that the Northern Lights team would really, really love to see that information, and I just would like to have that as well. So
Yeah.
thanks.
I can share it.
I'm gonna hop on after Amelia's piece and say there are also emergency response trainings that will occur in the fall as well, if people are looking for those. Um, For just a quick update for this group, since you're all systems level peeps, the regional collaborative, if you haven't heard of the 10 superintendents, supervisory districts that I currently coordinate UPK practices, has eliminated that position due to budget cuts, and is shifting my regional world back to individual districts. So one, kindly be patient with my 10 school districts, and two, they are working diligently and we are meeting upon meeting upon meeting in order to sustain practices. So I feel really confident that that will go okay in the fall, but it will be a bump in a transition. And people can continue to reach out to me till the end of the school year.
Last call before I
Yeah,
go make
any
myself a
other,
cup of tea.
right? It is a morning to get a refill on your coffee or tea. Also welcome anybody to just like share at this point, like thing. I know there's like lots of excitement about the provisional licensure piece, but any other like pieces people are excited about or want to hear more about, want us to follow up on, feel like they need to like, yeah, next meeting or future meeting agenda request. Now is the time.
I'd love a nutrition update to this group. Like
Awesome. Any angle
happening,
in
what's
specific?
happening in nutrition and
Okay.
foods and universal meals, et cetera, whatever. Cynthia caught that.
I did catch that, and it's been going through my mind. I can't. Um, okay, I can give a small update. I'm not Keely. Keely is really the one who should be giving this update from Hunger Free Vermont. I can tell folks that Universal School Meals, at least currently, has been fully funded and maintained through our legislature, which is great. We also have full funding for the Farm to School and Early Childhood Grants program this year. And this year the state allocated $500,000 for local food for schools and childcare, which went out to over $200,000 went out to childcare programs through local community supported agriculture grants, which is fantastic. And then the other piece that's been really important is $150,000 one-time funding this year to support CACFP, Child Adult Care Food Program sponsors. And I know that this year in the legislature, we are going back to ask for that to be increased to the 182,000 that was requested last year, and to try to make it more permanent. So all of this to say, I've been really quiet because I've been thinking about the rising costs and food in particular. We have a number of pilot projects out there trying to do bulk type purchasing with early childhood programs in a shared services model, where we're linking farm to school funding, we're linking health funding, we're actually linking some CDD funding through programs themselves and a lot of grant programs to pilot these, and we're learning a lot. But it is not easy. And it is not easy to link across these systems. And so I will just say from a nutrition perspective, one of the other pilots that Hunger Free Vermont has been championing is with a school district in the Mount Abraham, Bristol area, working through Universal School Meals and Universal Pre-K to see if we can get vended meals into early childhood programs. And again, yes, our policies allow, yes, there's some funding, and it's really, really difficult to do this work. So I am concerned about nutrition for all of the reasons that Erin raised around costs. We do see great fluctuations sometimes in the Child Adult Care Food Program participation rates. For centers, it feels cost burdensome. For family childcare, they might not have access to a sponsor, and that is the only way that they can participate. And we know that children and families with young children are more likely to feel the stress, right? The financial stress of what's happening at the federal level. So I have a couple irons and fires. I can't really talk about them yet. But some of it is thinking about ways to support early childhood programs, like kitchen equipment. We're having those discussions now, and we're going to continue to advocate that nutrition services part of early childhood business plans. You know, all the literature says, right? When you look at Head Start, you look at High Scope, you look at any of those, nutrition services were always a part of high quality early care and education. And I think if Vermont wants to get out in front of this, we need to take it really seriously from the ground up. How do we really support nutrition services being part of early care and education? So that's my soapbox. You've all heard it before. That's my optimism, Erin, as much as I can give it. We've got some things. We're really fortunate compared to other states. Vermont is very fortunate for the support it has. And we are getting quite a bit of money out the door to early childhood programs. It's not enough, and it's not systemic and organized. So we still have some work to do. That's what I got. Hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, Maslow's hierarchy, right? You have to meet the needs, have to feed, water, clothe, sleep, and that's your foundations to learning. So I'm just reading. Is that what we have, Anna?
I think that's what we have. Thank you all
Okay.
for being here on this dreary Thursday. That's not indeed a Monday, but feels like one. It was great to see everybody. We'll see you next month. We'll send out notes and the recording and hope to see many of you next week in person at the Strategic Plan Summit on Monday in Waterbury for those that can join. Thank you. Good to see everybody. Take care.